Charles Lloyd, in 1967, you were voted Jazz Artist of the Year by Downbeat magazine. That year, Claude Nobs was in the process of creating the Montreux Jazz Festival. His dream was to have you as the first star, and you came. Now it's time to tell us your side of the story.
Well, Claude had heard me the year before in Antibes, Juan Le Pen. And I'm told that he was very excited, and he said, we must have him to open our festival, to be the premier guest. So it was a great honor because the festival didn't exist till that year. He picked me up at the airport in Geneva. He was driving the Aston Martin car, and he had on the tape deck blues music by Lowell Folsom, I remember. And I grew up in the South, and I had played with all these blues guys, like Howlin' Wolf and Junior Parker and all of that. And we had an instant camaraderie because we were both youngsters who loved music. And I came to this beautiful heavenly paradise, and his hospitality was always amazing to me. And we had just a wonderful, relaxed, informal first concert. I recall, I think we played 2 or 3 times in various venues, or the main venue. And I fell in love with this place, and he and I had this great respect for the rich tradition that music brings. And I've come back many times over the years, and it's always been wonderful. And once I was in retreat up in the mountains, up in Lausanne, up here, for about a year. And he came up to get me, and he brought me down to his place. And I was a vegetarian, and he knew that. And he made me a lunch. I was with a friend, Mike Love, of the Beach Boys. We were both in a meditation retreat for about a year up there. He brought us down, and he made these wonderful porcini mushrooms. He grilled them simply but beautifully, and then he made a beautiful green salad, and that was our lunch. And I said, Claude knows what to do, you know. So with his music, he's always wants to have, he has a great palate.
Let me ask you this. Claude Nobs, at the time he met you, had already the experience with artists. For instance, he brought the Rolling Stones to Montreux, the first time the Rolling Stones ever went out of England. So he had this habit. But when he met you, he was so impressed that somehow you represent almost the impossible dream to have. Did you feel this at that time? Did you know how much he was impressed by you?
No, I didn't. I mean, of course he was very generous in his compliments, but one never knows, you know. I try to be keep my humility intact and realize that in music I'm an explorer, so I'm always striving to find something that I can share with humanity. And I just knew that we had a very warm cordiality, and I didn't know he had so much. Well, he must have if he brought me as his first artist.
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. And do you know that he said, at that time, he said, I mean, I don't think I can afford to have him. And apparently you made an effort so that he could afford to have you on the festival.
I don't know these things, yeah.
I know.
I don't deal with the economics of my music. Yeah.
But he was so impressed
well,
by the fact that
it was a great honor to be here.
There was another thing where he was also impressed, was the fact that you were from the jazz world very much in connection with the music that was starting. In particular, if I recall, the first one to play in this San Francisco theater that normally was for psychedelic music.
I played at the Fillmore and the Avalon.
Fillmore, right.
Yeah.
And what was it for you a choice to really enter or to be in connection with this world, with a psychological world, like the Doors? But I believe that you played in the same concert with them.
I played on concerts with the Doors, but Jimi Hendrix, the Grateful Dead always wanted to be on the same programs with us. I think what happened is that I was born in Memphis in the South, as I said earlier, and yet I had heard the music of Duke Ellington and Lester Young and Charlie Parker and Louis Armstrong. I lived on a river culture in Memphis, and somehow there was so much music that went back and forth. And there was this great genius, Phineas Newborn, who was my mentor when I was about 9 years of age. So I grew up in this very rich environment. And so, as I said to you earlier, I'd play with many of the blues greats like Bobby Blue Bland, who just passed away. I played my first gig with him, one of them. Anyway, when I played the Montreux Jazz Festival where we recorded Forest Flower, that was in 1966, and that record became explosive, very big. Well, the song Forest Flower came from living on a friend's estate in his guest house, and there was this beautiful forest of flowers outside, and I was writing this piece, so I called it Forest Flower. And I didn't know about flower power or the psychedelic movement. That didn't exist in the early 60s when I wrote this music. But then after Monterey, I went into San Francisco to play at a club called the El Matador. Famous writer Barnaby Conrad owned that place. And that was the quartet with Keith Jarrett, Jack DeJohnette, and Cecil McBee. But there was a group called the Committee Theater, which was sort of like, what's it called, Second City in Chicago, John Belushi and these people came out of. Well, these guys had a theater down the street on Broadway in San Francisco, and they would come to hear me every night after they finished. And they just loved our group so much, and they said there's this place called the Fillmore, and there's this guy, Bill Graham, and I think that the young people in San Francisco would love to hear your music. So I went over to play for half an hour one Sunday afternoon at the invitation of Graham, because they were so raving about me in the city that we didn't get off the stage for an hour and a half. Carlos Santana was standing down front, all the musicians, and Carlos told me, he said, "Free the people, Charles," you know, like that. And the thing is that there was this connection, because maybe from my roots and everything that I had come from, and then all the groups in San Francisco, the Jefferson Airplane at the time, mostly the Grateful Dead, they were a folk blues band, and I had played in blues bands, and so that's a part of me. I'm a blues man singing a spiritual song, essentially, is what we have here. And they heard it, and so we began to play a lot together, and it was open, and there was a time of hope, and the young people wanted to, they were moving from a materialistic society to one of more spiritual inclinations and humanity, and do not do unto others as you not have them to do unto you. And it became a conflict with the larger society that wanted to keep things status quo. So that's how that first started. And then I traveled to colleges, universities, and Claude was one of the first people, well, Antibes was the first festival I think I came over to play. And I played many tours of Europe, about 9 tours of Europe in a period of about 3 years, yeah.
The psychedelic period, the hippie period, how did you feel yourself? Do you feel part of it or close to it? How do you, at that time, how do you regard it?
Well, I like the ideals very much. I'm a dreamer, and I'm always in hopes that humanity can rise to its full potential without the false impediments of how the systems operate. So there were a lot of idealists in that. So there was a simpatico. I wouldn't call myself a hippie. I'm Native American and African American, and I have some other strands in me.
Mongolian, if I...
Mongolian, and I'm Cherokee Nation. But you see, there are things that bother me about my country and how things worked. The Native American side of me and the African side of me with slavery. I just made a recording called Hagar's Song, and it's in reference to my great-great-grandmother, who at 10 years old in Mississippi was taken from her parents, snatched from her parents, taken and sold in Tennessee to some slavery guy for $300 and raped and pillaged, and she had a child at 13 or so. And you know, these things, they bother me. It's a quasi-religious country, but not necessarily a spiritual country. So I welcome the idealism of the young people of the times. And I hoped, my dream always is for a better world. So we had no problems with that. And then, but as a very young man, things happened to me that were happening so fast, you see. So
did you find that success is difficult related to spirituality? When you become so successful, is it hard to keep this sense of let's say, spirituality? I understand that you are in meditation, and how do you manage to deal success in this?
I didn't deal so well because there was so much coming at me all the time, you know, that I began to medicate myself, to tell you the truth. And when I would medicate myself, then tragic magic would make it so that I could walk through this chaos and continue to play the music. At first, it fueled the creativity, but after a time, it began to impede the creativity. And I realized I was getting off my spiritual moorings. I was not at my full best that I felt. So in '69, I disbanded the quartet and went away to heal, because I knew that if I was going to go forward, I would have to recharge my batteries. And so I didn't know that I would come back and play in a public way again. And so it lasted a long time, my retreat. When I was here in Switzerland in the 70s somewhere, do you know what year it was?
I know that you played again in 1982 for sure. You were in Montreux Jazz in '82.
Yeah, when Petrucciani came. But I was somewhere in the mid to late 70s. I was here. I was in France in retreat, and I was here. I was in a town called Arosa. Have you ever heard of that town?
In the mountain?
Yeah, in Lausanne. So, but I was living like a hermit. You know, I began to gain my. It came back from me, this thirst for spiritual life. You see, we're all, how to say, we're spirits on a human journey. We're passing through here. I always had the knowledge that life was school. And you see, when I was 9 years old, I won first prize on an amateur show playing the saxophone. I was this little kid. And I had this huge ovation. And I went into the wings, and there was standing Phineas Newborn, who was maybe 16 or 17. And he said to me, "You need lessons bad." So, meaning that illusions of grandeur were nipped in the bud. So I've always had beginner's mind to be an explorer. He took me by the hand. He took me around the corner on Beale Street to a wonderful saxophonist, Irving Reason, who was a disciple of Charlie Parker. And I began to study. So I was always confused by how civilization doesn't get along, you know, this polarities and this have and have-nots. So in music, I could create a better world. I could reorganize and restructure. I love that idea. And then I always wanted to have musicians with me who could take that journey, because there's a lot of shores that my music dances on. And I have the Native American songs of my great-grandmother, Sally Sunflower White Cloud. And there was a period in America where they took her lands and they made the indigenous people go on something called the Trail of Tears, which was named afterwards, the Trail of Tears. And they took these people's rich land and made them walk to Oklahoma. Well, my grandmother great-grandmother wouldn't do that, and she married my great-grandfather, who had formerly been a slave. And the beautiful thing was that their child was my grandfather, who raised me a lot in Mississippi when I was a young child. And he had a large farm that he had grown himself at 1,600 acres, and I could walk. He had big orchards, and I could walk among, and with my thoughts and ideas. My grandmother was very religious. He built a church for her in the area, but he never went to the church, you know. He was a man of action, and he ran his farm. He was a free man, and he was conscious of education very much. And the interesting thing about him was that he did go to church with her one Sunday, and his barn burned down. So he said, okay, that's that. But he was very spiritual in his life. So like that, I'm always on a quest. But for me, music is my expression of the life.
During the period when you were an hermit, so to speak, did you go as far as leaving your saxo in the closet? During the time when you were out of any stage, did you go as far as leaving your saxo in the closet?
There were times when it was there in the closet, but I was always drawn to music, even when we lived in Big Sur, in big isolation. My nearest neighbor was 1.5 miles on either side. But I would play because the nature was so strong, and it's my nature to make music. So I never left music. I just left the public life because I had, it was difficult for me as a very young man, you know, and that I had to regain my balance. No, I still played. I always played. Even now, when I hike in the mountains and swim underwater, I'm thinking of musical problems and situations of how to create beauty.
And when Michel Petrucciani started to play with you, all of a sudden you're back on stage. How did it happen that this combination came?
I was studying a lot and reading a lot, and I became very interested in Vedanta, which is ancient Hindu religion which teaches the harmony of all religions, and it teaches that divinity is your birthright. And I liked that it wasn't narrow. It was very open. And a teacher, when the disciple is ready, a teacher will manifest. And a teacher was going up the coast from Los Angeles to San Francisco, and he stopped at our retreat place, and he helped me a lot, you know. And then Petrucciani came in about 81, something like that. He was about 17, and he had this beautiful talent. I was away and in Santa Barbara, I think at the time, and my wife called me on the phone, and she had him playing my Steinway in the background. And I drove back home. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know he was there. I didn't know about him. And when I got back, I had also been reading simultaneously at this time an ancient Sanskrit text about a young man with a bent frame. And I came back, and he was this diminutive young man. and he played like an angel. He was like an avatar. You know, he had all this beautiful music. When he was very young, he told his father he wanted to play the piano, and his father got him a toy piano, and he took a hammer and smashed it. He said, "I said a piano." He had seen Duke Ellington on French television, and it struck a chord with him. And we began to play, and then I realized at that point that the elders had always helped me. So I took that to mean that I was going to have to leave my retreat and take him around the world and to share him to get a proper start. So that I took him around the world for 2 years. And in '82, Claude had us here. We recorded here also, I think the album's called Live at Montreux. And he was very instrumental in my coming back, because I don't know that I was going to come back in a public way. I was, you know, when you sweep a room, dust flies, you know, but in spiritual life, in spiritual practice, you don't watch the dust, you simply continue to pull the weeds from the garden and like this. And so we built orchards, we had vegetable gardens, and we lived a very simple life, sort of like Thoreau, where we would have simple living and high thinking. So we were very blessed. But the Providence work, that him coming was Providence, and that it got me back to playing. So once I got him started, then I said, okay, now you can go on because you're known in the world now. But then by that time I was bitten by the cobra. I realized I had to come back and play. So after another time I came back. Yeah.
Charles Lloyd, we are in 2013. You've come many times to this region. You said several times to Montreux. This will be my last question. How do you see the evolution in Montreux? What difference do you see from one time to another when you're here?
Well, it was very simple, pure intentions when Claude first started this festival, and there was great enthusiasm, and it has only grown and blossomed. It has become, I think Claude had very Catholic taste, in the meaning that he loved jazz and he loved blues. I knew those things. And so I guess he just expanded upon it, and he was a very charismatic, warm individual. I remember the last time I was here, he had us up at his chateau, you know, and that you have this is a very spiritual place, because it's like Valhalla, you know. You look out and you have this wonderland, and it has only grown, and I have always had a warm feeling about it. It's much different. It was a very simpler time then. I think we played at the casino. Is that where it was the first venue? Mm-hmm. And now he's built this beautiful hall, and one of the things that he wanted to do before he passed away was that my wife, Dorothy Darr, she's a painter and architect, but she's a filmmaker. He wanted me to have a statue across from the hotel here. And because the first hotel we used, I think, was the Riviera, he wanted to commission a statue, and you know, that would symbolize that I was the first artist here. And I guess he didn't live long enough to accomplish that dream. But we had been talking about it for years, and Dorothy had designed the Giacometti type statue of me playing the instrument. And so that's something that I was very touched that he had this vision. And I think he has one of B.B. and Ray Charles and Miles around. Mm-hmm. And but to have been a part of from the very start, that's what's really important. Not the idea of the statue, but I was very touched that he felt the true connection to the beginning, although the festival had grown And people would make noise, well, it's not just a jazz festival now. Well, he loved music. You know, when you love music, you love a lot of it. So I never had that polarity issue with him. And to have this festival continue, it shows what a beautiful life and what a beautiful legend he is, and the contribution that he has made to Switzerland and the world. You know, it's very, and it's a great honor for me. Namaste, and I thank you.